Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and today is another psychology rant. And what I'm going to be focusing on today is those who call coping strategies or self-care just BS, namby-pamby, overly positive ways to avoid actually dealing with your ish. They see coping strategies or coping skills as nothing more than symptom relief or not actually addressing the problem at hand. And what I find is that either therapists or individuals who have that stance on coping strategies or coping skills tend to primarily focus on distraction tactics or avoidance coping skills. And yes, we do focus on avoidance or distraction as a skill that we teach in therapy, but that's not the only type of coping strategy or coping skill there is. There are different categories of coping strategies and coping skills. One of them is those that are coping skills that are focused on dealing with your emotions or handling emotions. There are coping skills focused on dealing with the problem or learning how to actually problem solve effectively. There are coping strategies focused on finding meaning or finding some type of higher purpose in things that are happening for you. There are coping skills that are focused on looking for social supports and seeking assistance or seeking some type of help. And those who tend to call coping strategies or coping skills BS or just this overly positive spin on dealing with life are those individuals that focus on things like deep breathing or mindfulness or meditation or just, taking a break. But however, those things are helpful and they're necessary. But the purpose of distraction or avoidance types of coping strategies is so that we're able to deal with highly overwhelming, highly upsetting emotions. So if you've ever noticed, like when you are on high alert, when your body and your mind is feeling keyed up and you feel like you're on 1000 emotion wise, your ability to problem solve, to think rationally, to come up with great ideas is not there, because that part of your brain kind of goes out the window because you are now so emotionally overwhelmed that you develop what we consider tunnel visions, and your emotions themselves create this tunnel vision where all you are focused on in that moment is the emotions that you're having and the things that cause that emotion. And when we're in that emotional tunnel, if we don't do something in that moment, and what we tend to focus on are distraction strategies so that we're able to start to de-escalate those emotions. And that's the purpose of those distraction tactics, is so that you can start to de-escalate those emotions. And when we try to do these things by ourselves at home without some type of guidance or understanding the purpose of the coping strategy, we may get to a place where we are simply avoiding dealing with life, because distraction tactics or distracting coping strategies are something that is meant to be brief and done for maybe 5 to 30 minutes or possibly up to an hour. And the only goal in that moment is for you to start to de-escalate your emotions so you can come back and deal with the problem at hand. Because at the end of the day, if we don't deal with the problem, then that emotion is going to keep happening until you actually deal with the root of the problem. So that's why distraction tactics are necessary. But you also sometimes need therapy to understand, how do I implement this? Because when you don't know how to implement it, you can engage in that distraction tactic for hours or days on end. And at that point, you are simply avoiding dealing with the issue, because you are distracting yourself from actually dealing with both the emotion and the source of that emotion, or the problem that is actually creating that emotion. And that is problematic. And most people engage in that because when they hear people talk about coping strategies, or when they read about coping strategies, it feels like common sense. It feels like, oh my God, like deep breathing. I've been breathing my whole life. I don't need nobody to tell me how to breathe. I know how to breathe. But it never fails that when I'm actually in session and I ask someone, like, have you ever used deep breathing? And they'll quickly say yes. And when I say, show me what it looks like for you to deep breathe, it'll look something like this. And let's be clear, that is not deep breathing. That is going to result in one of two things. You're either going to start to hyperventilate or you're going to pass out, and that helps no one. So this is why we sometimes need to learn how to implement and utilize these coping strategies, and not simply listen to the name of it and feel like you can do it on your own. And there's a purpose for deep breathing. It has a mind-body connection that allows you to send signals to your mind and your body to start to calm that emotional response that your body is going through in that moment. And that's why we do focus on deep breathing. So all of these things have a purpose, and all of these things have a mind-body connection that we utilize to help you handle those emotions so you can actually deal with the problem at hand. And that's the purpose of coping strategies. So if you're working with a therapist, and I don't care if this therapist is a psychologist, a social worker, or counselor, counselor. I really don't care what their degree is, but if you're working with a therapist and they don't actually understand or practice using coping strategies or show you how to use effective coping strategies, I'm not going to tell you to avoid dealing with them as a therapist, but I am going to tell you to proceed with caution, because at this point, anybody in the mental health field who understands that mind-body connection understands the purpose of coping strategies and knows and understands that coping strategies is necessary. Because like I said before, when you're feeling keyed up, when your emotions are on 1000, when you feel like that you're in that emotional tunnel and all you can focus on is how you're feeling emotionally and the thing that caused that, you're not going to be effective at problem solving. You're not going to be effective at dealing with that root cause of that issue. One of three things is going to happen. You're either going to, one, avoid the issue altogether. You're going to be sitting there like, you see an issue over there? I don't see one either. Ain't nothing over there. You don't see that. Ain't over there. You're going to avoid the problem altogether, or you're going to make the problem somebody else's issue. You're going to try to make someone else responsible for finding a resolution or help you find a resolution, and you're going to be upset when they can't. You're going to be upset that no one's helping you or that no one's trying to figure this out for you. So you're going to make your issue somebody else's responsibility. Or third, you're going to be impulsive. You're going to be impulsive and you're going to do the first thing that comes in mind, and you're going to do the first thing that comes in mind so this thing that's bothering you can get out of your face. And the problem with doing the first thing that comes in mind is we rarely think about the consequences of that actual solution or what we're trying to do to resolve the problem. And most of the time when we're being impulsive, it's like putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. Does it stop the bleeding? A little bit. But at this point, you're still bleeding out because that wound that you put a Band-Aid on actually needed stitches. So because you were working from the emotion mind at that moment, you used that Band-Aid instead of trying to figure out, what do I need to do to get to the hospital to get stitches? That's what it looks like when we don't actually learn how to deal with those emotions, when we don't use coping skills and coping strategies to handle those overwhelming emotions. And that's the outcome of you not learning how to manage those emotions and learning things to do to actually cope, whether it's being able to learn how to problem solve or learning how to look for solutions even when those emotions are elevated. And there are coping strategies that focus on being able to manage distress, because there are going to be times where you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and learning how to sit in those uncomfortable emotions, because change doesn't happen when we're comfortable. So learning how to sit in those uncomfortable emotions and notice that it's not breaking me completely, I'm not completely unraveling, is also a coping strategy. Consider distress tolerance. And that's something that's taught in therapy as well, is learning how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's a skill that we don't all have. So it's two things that irritate me and that irk my nerves about people, especially therapists, that talk about coping strategies and self-care as being like this just namby-pamby BS that you shouldn't be giving a whole lot of effort and thought into. That very first one being is that those therapists, 9 times out of 10, are the same individuals that's using all of these strategies when they get out of session, when they get offline telling you that it's BS. They're the same ones that get off of the internet or get out of session and talk to their co-workers to de-stress after a taxing session. Or they're the ones who go home and talk to their spouse or their significant other about their day and decompress. They are also the ones who go home and play with their kids or plan a play date or go out to the park or do something with their children that makes them feel a little bit better. They're also the ones who are in church every Sunday, who are on prayer calls every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, even if they're at 6 a.m., which is way too early for me, but hey, people do it every day. Because prayer is a coping strategy. These are the same individuals that use these coping strategies, that use the self-care. These are the same individuals that plan an outing with their homegirls, that may be planning on going out to brunch this weekend. These are the same people that plan to go and hang out with their homeboys and just watch the game. These are those same individuals that use these coping strategies on a daily basis, but they may not call it that. They may call it anything. They may call it just hanging out. They may call it just making time for myself. But they are coping strategies. They are coping skills. And these individuals, which I'm not clear if they learned coping strategies while they were going through graduate school and understood the purpose of them and the usefulness of them, or were made to do them while they were in graduate school, or if they learned them as a child growing up where they had caretakers and caregivers and parents who were clear and allowed them and helped them be in tune with their emotions, or allowed them to make space for themselves, or taught them how to deal with complex or strong emotions. these are the individuals that tend to have that already learned skill to use or make time for themselves, that don't quite understand that not everybody has that ability. Not everybody was raised in an environment or were taught how to use coping. Not everybody were taught or allowed to actually experience or deal with their emotions as they were. Some people were taught to dampen their emotions, to ignore their emotions, to pretend like those emotions aren't happening. Some people were taught that their emotions were wrong, so they never learned how to actually cope. So some people need to actually be taught these things, especially how to reach out for help, how to seek the help of others, because some people feel like if I reach out for help, then I'm a burden to other people. So therapy teaches individuals how to reach out for help and learn how to sit with that uncomfortableness of feeling like a burden and starting to understand and see that they are not a burden to others simply for asking for help. And my second gripe is that when that therapist looks like me, and when I say look like me, I mean Black. I mean African American or Black American, to be specific. Because let me be really clear. What Black people have been able to do for centuries is put their head down and get through. They've been able to thrive when things have been thrown at them left, right, and center. And they've been able to put their heads down and push and plow forward and get things done and look good while doing it. For centuries, we as Black people have been able to deal with multiple stressors. Not only our own stress, but the stress of other people around us, the stress of our communities. We've been able to take on that stress. We've learned how to take on that stress and just continue to deal with it and make it look good and do something with it and come to a resolution or get to the other side of that stress. But we've done that at what cost? Because what Black people haven't really been good at, being able to take a break and not feeling lazy or not feeling unproductive. Being able to rest and relax and eat well or sleep well and understand that that plays a role in their ability to continue to do the work that they're doing. They haven't been able to manage the stress in a way that it doesn't affect their physical health. They haven't managed to handle stress in a way that it doesn't lead to cardiovascular disease or hypertension or dying from a stroke at 40, 50, or 60 years old way too soon, because you're just simply taking on all the stress, but you're not actually dealing with the emotions or the stress itself. You're simply ignoring it and you're simply putting your head down and pushing forward. And simply putting your head down and pushing forward is a way to get by. You can do that, and that can be done, and you will be effective at getting to some type of resolution. Is it the best resolution? Maybe. But at what cost to your mental and physical health? So when you look like me and you're in the position of a therapist, take into consideration the toll that not dealing with your chronic stress or not dealing with overwhelming stressors and not being aware of your emotions, the toll that it takes on your physical and mental health. And understand that in our community, we don't need to learn how to put our heads down and plow forward through all the muck and the grime that's out there, because we do that. We know how to hustle. We know how to grind. We've been taught that for forever. But what we don't know how to do is to make time for ourselves, to take breaks when necessary, to give back to ourselves, to not feel guilty for doing something that we enjoy, even when we have other things that we need to do. To take that moment and just to breathe and allow your mind to be clear for a moment. That's something that we don't really do well in our community. So again, this is just my rant. This is just me being highly annoyed with people who share my same position in mental health, telling others that coping strategies or self-care is just BS and you don't need to actually put a lot of effort into it, because you need to figure out how to deal with your problems. And once you do that, then you'll probably have less stress. And is that true? Yes. If you figure out how to deal with your problems and actually put your head down and just get through it, you will probably be less stressed, because that will be one thing taken off your plate. But if you don't learn to take time for yourself through that process, because life will keep lifing, and life tends to not just hand you one stress at a time. Life doesn't say, oh, you got that one stress, and let me let you figure that one out. Once you figure that one out, I'll give you the rest. No, life is like, let me give you this one. Oh, okay, okay, hold on, let me give you 10 more. Oh, you're not dealing with them. Okay, so since you ain't dealing with them, let me give you some more. So life is going to continue to life, and you can continue to put your head down and push and plow forward as much as you want. And when you get to the other side of that, yes, but you might be dealing with health issues and mental health issues that you are not prepared to handle, or you don't want to handle, or that you may have had the ability to avoid had you just taken the opportunity to learn how to manage that stress, to learn how to manage your emotions. And you don't have to call it coping strategies, because I get it. We get in this state where we have catchwords or catchphrases for everything, and people feel like they hear it and they know what it means. And 9 times out of 10, they don't, and they implement something that is less likely to be a coping strategy or actual coping skill. Is just something they feel like they should be doing. I get that. So if you don't want to call it a coping strategy, if you don't want to call it a coping skill, I could care less what you call it. You can call it a flying flea biscuit for all I care. You can call it just hanging out. You can call it just making time for myself. You can call it just giving back to me. You can call it loving me enough to make time for me. I don't care what you call it, as long as you do it. And do it means taking the time to give yourself a break, even when the stress is high. And in 2025, if you aren't clear that the stress is going to be here, or you don't already have stress right now that you're dealing with on a daily basis, then I'm not really sure where you're living. And I'd also like to join you, because I have stress on a daily basis. So learning how to manage that stress so you can come out on the other side of it with both a resolution and somewhat of an intact physical and mental health is the goal of coping strategies, and is the goal of self-care. That's it. So I hope you take something from this video today. I hope you learned something from this video today. As always, feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. Again, I hope you take something from this video that is useful. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.